Daiko Jin raised the Tanbokiri in his hand. "It's about time we stopped playing around. I'll send you on your way." He raised the Tanbokiri in his hand and swung at Mo Zhongning. His attack was accompanied by a thunderous momentum, and the terrifying power made the air crackle. At this moment, from the distant mist, a shooting star broke through the sky and smashed fiercely towards Daiko Jin. Daiko Jin's eyes narrowed. The man's timing was very clever. He struck the left side of his body the instant he swung the Tanbokiri. His timing was ruthless. At this moment, Daiko Jin could not possibly stop and block. His left arm quickly bulged, blocking it directly in front of his body. Boom! The meteor-like heavy object slammed hard onto Daiko Jin's left arm. The heavy and terrifying force made the Yokozuna's body shake, and he had to take a dozen steps to the side to dissipate the force. Wu Shifang, Mo Zhongning, and Li Weihai, who were in despair, saw this scene and their eyes gradually lit up with hope. They knew it was the Heavenly God Squad. The legendary squad with the highest mission success rate in the entire Jiangnan region. Bang! The flying object crashed heavily to the ground. Daiko Jin looked closely and realized it was a huge anchor with chains attached. Clank! In the direction the chains extended, figures slowly walked out of the mist. "You can leave for now. We'll handle the rest." 3 figures appeared in the thick fog. They were all wearing combat uniforms that looked incredibly flashy, making them look like gods. The one in the middle had shoulder-length hair and a feminine face, with a deep smile on the corner of his mouth. He is Bai Chunyu, one of the 2 deputy captains of the Heavenly God Squad, and he had exchanged words with Zhang Yi before. There were 2 others beside him. One had red hair and a stern face. The other was wrapped in heavy silver armor, with a thick iron chain wrapped around his right hand. That heavy anchor was thrown by him. Li Taichang raised his hand, and the heavy chain in his hand shook. The heavy anchor soared into the air, tracing a parabolic arc through the air before returning to his hands as if it were weightless. After the 3 of them appeared, Daiko Jin no longer looked at Wu Shifang and the others in the same way. Even Yoshimitsu Sakuraba and Kurosawa Akira, who were watching from the back, narrowed their eyes. Heavenly God Squad. They're said to be very powerful. How powerful? Just fight them and you'll know. Bai Chunyu said to Mo Zhongning and the others, "You should leave quickly. Your mission is complete, so go as far away as possible." He glanced at Mo Zhongning and the others out of the corner of his eye. "Otherwise, when the fighting starts, I won't be able to protect you." Mo Zhongning and Li Weihai hurriedly nodded their heads as if they were mashing garlic. At this moment, they wished to escape immediately and never get involved in this battle again. Fortunately, the 2 of them had a conscience, and before leaving, they dragged Wu Shifang, who was beaten like a dead dog. As for Jia Heading, who was buried deep underground, they were afraid to rescue him and were unable to do so. The 3 of them fled the battlefield in a mess. Mo Zhongning said as if he had lost his soul, "We have overestimated ourselves." Northern Front. Chua Feiyu and the others are also finding it increasingly difficult to fight. The Orochi snake, the avatar of Kamaya Gedo, had extremely terrifying defensive and offensive capabilities, forcing them to commit 3 people to the battle. However, after familiarizing themselves with Shuofeiyu's gunblade and locking onto Yu Xingyang's sniper position, Kamaya Gedo quickly took control of the initiative in the battlefield. As a last resort, a 3rd person joined the battle. In Misty Valley City, it was Liu Yuchen. While Shuofeiyu and Yu Xingyang attracted the attention of Kamaya Gedo, he hid in the shadows and activated his supernatural powers. He opened his mouth and a long, thin green mist spewed out like a long dragon towards the Orochi snake. It quickly enveloped the Orochi snake. An extremely disgusting fishy smell overwhelmed the Orochi snake. Is this thing poisonous? The Orochi snake suddenly realized what this thing was. Liu Yuchen sneered, "Your scales may be hard, but you still need to breathe, don't you? I bet your internal organs are softer than your scales." Shuofeiyu and Yu Xingyang subconsciously moved away from the poisonous mist. They knew very well how strong Liu Yuchen's poisonous mist was. Just 0.01 milligrams could be lethal. Even if they were wearing tactical helmets, they didn't want to get even the slightest bit of it on them. After tumbling around in the poisonous mist for a while, the Orochi snake suddenly let out a big, ironic laugh as it looked up at the sky. Ha ha ha. Stupid bastard, you think you can kill me? Instead of avoiding the poisonous mist, it opened its mouth wide and swallowed a large amount of it into its own mouth. This scene made Liu Yuchen and the others' scalps tingle. What? What is he doing? The cold pupil of Kamaya Gato looked down at them. I am the venomous viper. Liu Yuchen never would have imagined that his abilities would be completely restrained by Kamaya Gato. The poisonous mist was useless against the poisonous snake, and he became a useless wreck. Ho! The Orochi snake opened its mouth wide and spat out a mouthful of dark saliva at Liu Yuchen. Liu Yuchen came back to his senses from his shock and fled in a panic. However, his speed could not escape the saliva, and his body was still stained with a large area. Hiss! The well-made Yanyan standard combat uniform was directly corroded by this mouthful of saliva, and it quickly spread inward. Even half of his shoulder was directly melted off. Ah! Liu Yuchen let out a wail of extreme pain. He rolled around on the ground like a maggot, but soon his body turned completely black and he could no longer move. This was the fate of a mutant whose powers had been completely suppressed. At a time like this, he was no better than an ordinary person. Yu Xingyang and Zhuo Feiyu felt their hearts sink. Liu Yuchen was killed in seconds? How were they, outnumbered 2-1, going to deal with this prehistoric behemoth? The Orochi snake stood upright on one side, looking down at them coldly. Next, it's your turn. As for Akutsu Shinichiro, he was engaged in a battle with Yuan Hao and Xiao Lingling. Compared to the mutants Kamaya Gato and Daiko Yanjin, Akutsu Shinichiro's abilities were mediocre. He is just an ordinary mutant with an enhancement system, using a metal bat that street thugs are used to using. At first, Xiao Lingling was even able to take the initiative in the battle. Her strange strength is terrifying, and it is extremely rare even among mutants with an enhancement system. She was able to use her bare body to counteract Akutsu's weapon. This all came from Yuan Hao behind her. Yuan Hao looked weak and feeble, with no combat power at all. But he just stood there, shouting encouragement to Xiao Lingling. Come on, come on. Lingling, you're the best. As he cheered her on, Xiao Lingling's pupils also began to glow with a strange lavender light, and her strength and speed both increased dramatically. Akutsu knew that Yuan Hao was a support character, but Xiao Lingling was in the way, and he simply didn't have a chance to break through. So he adopted the simplest and most direct way of fighting, to finish Xiao Lingling off. As the battle continued, the speed with which he swung his metal bat increased. Slowly, the initiative on the battlefield changed. Xiao Lingling was starting to fall behind in the power struggle. A worried look flashed in Yuan Hao's eyes. How could this happen? Lingling is clearly invincible. His small, white face puffed up in defiance. It must be that I'm not cheering loud enough. I need to try harder. So he placed his hands by his mouth and shouted even louder. Strange violet light began to glow on the surface of Xiao Lingling's body. She opened her mouth, and her 2 sharp fangs began to grow longer. The fingernails on each of her 10 fingers extended 10 centimeters, each one as black as a dagger. At this moment, she looked like a vampire. Ah! Xiao Lingling roared and charged at Akutsu. Akutsu let out a crazed laugh, swung his metal bat in both hands, and smashed it at her body. It's time to end the game. Akutsu Shinichiro, enhancement-type mutant, ability code Yakuza hero. As a hooligan who has been hanging out on the streets of Chiba for many years, fighting is like second nature to him. What he craves is the courage to fight harder and harder, and the invincibility that comes with it. And just like his person, his power will only grow stronger as long as the fighting continues. It can even be said that as long as a fight lasts long enough, there will be no upper limit to his growth, and he could even fight mutants at the Epsilon level. Of course, this is just a theoretical statement. But when facing an opponent of similar strength, as long as he lasts until the end, he will definitely win. And now, Akutsu's heroic spirit has accumulated enough. Akutsu's baseball bat and Xiaolingling collided once again. But this time, he deftly avoided Xiaolingling's sharp claws, and the baseball bat hit her side. You would be surprised how a blunt baseball bat can rip a person's body apart. However, the reality is that when the speed is fast enough, the power of a baseball bat is not much different from that of a samurai sword. So Xiaolingling's body was cut in half directly at the waist. In her shocked eyes, her body was split in two and rushed out under the force of inertia. Bang! Bang! The two halves of the body fell to the ground. Yuan Hao's face turned even paler. He clenched his fists and shouted, "You bastard, how dare you hurt my Lingling?" Huh? Hurt? Akutsu looked at Yuan Hao, who was carrying the baseball bat, somewhat speechless. She's been cut in half, and you call that an injury? Yakuzu soon understood why Yuan Hao had said such a thing. Because Xiaolingling, who had fallen to the ground, suddenly had hundreds of blood-colored thin tubes extend from between her two halves, which then connected together. As the blood-colored tubes contracted, her two halves firmly merged together, even every last muscle being stitched together perfectly. However, through the terrifying wound, you could see that the flesh and blood were lifeless, like the flesh of a zombie that had been frozen for many years. Xiaolingling got up from the ground, her expression turning cold and terrifying as she stared at Akutsu. "What the hell?" Akutsu said indifferently, "So it's a zombie."